Hi everyone, Prynhawn croeso. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you to everyone who came to our show and tell. We're going to talk to you about our work around the cost of living co-design bilingual content project we've been doing. Apologies that we're looking at some slides to begin with. We had some technical issues during the session. So the first few slides are going to be just me talking over, and then we will change to the actual presentation that we did for our show and tell. So first of all, we're going to talk to you about who we are at CDPS, the context of Wales and why this work is important, what we did, why we did it and how we did it, and some of the things that we learned and the challenges we faced as we went along. So we're CDPS, Centre for Digital Public Services. We're an arm's length body of the Welsh Government, and together with the Chief Digital Officers in Health, Welsh Government and local government, we're responsible for delivering the digital strategy for Wales. So our role is to support public sector organisations to design and deliver services that meet the needs of the people who use them, to help to build digital capability in the public sector in Wales, to enable collaboration and share good practice. So our team was made up of people from inside the Centre for Digital Public Services. So we had Tom, our user researcher, myself, a delivery manager, Liam, interaction designer, Adrian, content designer, and Kerry, who was our Welsh translator. So we had a multidisciplinary team, and at the start of this piece of work, we identified the skills that we felt we'd need to deliver the project effectively, and pulled together those people based on that. So the key focus here was to understand the need of users and design services and solutions that meet those needs. So there's a lot of expertise in this team around user-centred design. We made sure we had the same team working on the project throughout, so we weren't passing work from person to person. And having Kerry as our Welsh translator was a critical part of this work, helping to ensure that our content was designed bilingually, rather than being designed in English and then translated to Welsh. So including her throughout the whole process was a critical part of that. So to provide you with some wider context around this work before we talk more about the detail of what we did. I'm sure that everyone working in this space knows the challenges that people are facing at the moment. Just a quote here from the ONS. Around 3 in 4 adults worry about the rising cost of living, and personal wellbeing is still below pre-pandemic levels. So in Wales, even before the coronavirus pandemic, around a quarter of people in Wales were in poverty. So that's about 700,000 people. And 1 in 8 are sometimes, often, or always not having enough money for the basic things that they need. And 4 in 10 are going without heating in their home. So many Welsh households are going without the things that they need and have concerns about the future and how the rising cost of living is going to impact them further. At the same time, there's also significant underclaiming of benefits in Wales. There's a number of reasons for this. Some of it's due to poor information provision, so people are unaware of the range of welfare and benefits that are available to them. There's also stigma, so people are unwilling to claim. That is sometimes overemphasised, but it is still a cause for concern. And then there's a lot of challenges to people claiming benefits and support. So it could be bureaucratic hurdles. People are struggling to do the things they need to do to access that support. It could be other things like mental health difficulties, literacy problems that mean that people can't access the support that they so badly need. And there's also people with changing circumstances. So older people, for example, but don't know the benefits that they're actually entitled to. So we identified some issues that this project was trying to resolve. One of the key problems is that delivery of benefits and support across Wales is inconsistent and information is inaccessible. People aren't aware of the services, and eligibility criteria can be really complicated and act as a barrier to people accessing the support that they need. Alongside that, not all services are designed around the user. They haven't had user input into the way that they're designed, and they just don't work in the way that users need them to. And then data sharing is a real problem as well, and data just isn't being shared effectively across internal departments or government bodies. In November, we hosted a workshop with over 70 colleagues from local government, Welsh Government, and charities to try and unpick some of these problems and try and identify some of the ways that we might be able to solve some of these challenges. And some of the ways that we identified that might be able to help were improving consistency, so consistency in things like information, consistency in eligibility, breaking internal silos, and looking at things from user perspective. So we've got to design services for end to end, and we need to design with accessibility in mind for everything that we do. So there's lots and lots of big issues that could take, a lot of time and effort to solve. But one of the key things we identified that could be done potentially within a short space of time was around creating consistent content across Wales around the cost of living. So at the moment, inconsistent content and inconsistent information is causing confusion to the people that need to access benefits and services. And the suggestion that came out of this workshop was that we could find ways to co-design content with local authorities and other organisations to reduce duplication, so reduce the amount of time and resource that organisations are spending developing content, and also make content that means it's easier for people to navigate and access the cost of living support and services and benefits that are available to them. So this is where I will pass you over to the show and tell that we did on Monday the 24th.
We were hearing a lot from those workshops and wider, more anecdotally, in some of the work that was going on across public sector, that content was proving a real issue and a real barrier to people accessing the services they're entitled to. We were hearing that content is inaccessible, so the language perhaps is too formal and jargonistic, difficult to understand. The amount of content could be overwhelming. Long walls of text, too much on a page, people were really struggling to kind of comprehend it all. Often confusing, so again, going back to the language, but also the actual journey and the findability of some of the content itself. And then some content was being thought intimidating, so like really complex passages of content or threatening disclaimers, that kind of thing. So we decided to kind of focus on content and dig into that a bit more. So we did. We started off a bit of a discovery initially, a pre-discovery almost initially, just to look at the kind of content problem in a bit more detail. So I did a bit of desk-based research, knowing that WLGA, CDPS, Felon Foundation, ONS have already done some research into this kind of subject. So looking at that and bringing it all together helped us to kind of understand the problem a bit better. And it also helped us develop a set of user needs that we use a bit later on in the content design. But in terms of the initial messages that were coming out, so people are unsure about their eligibility, so the content is confusing to the point where even after reading it, they're unsure whether it applies to them and whether they're eligible. They're also unaware of the kind of things they need to apply. So, it could be that they need pay slips or their NI number. So their journey comes to an end because they don't have that to hand. The content was sometimes so confusing, people would apply for the wrong services. So there are lots of services, particularly around kind of council tax and things, that have very similar titles. So people would end up wasting their precious time, feeling incredibly frustrated because they've gone halfway down applying for the wrong service. And what was quite shocking was that people are just giving up on their applications. So these people who are in financial dire straits and are entitled to this money, this support, are giving up on that application and going without, which is pretty shocking. And a lot of this is often resulting in failure demand. So if you don't know, failure demand is when a service breaks down and people end up, say, contacting the customer contact centre in the local authority to try and resolve it. or they're turning to other services and third sector services, for example, like citizens advice and scope, or they're even considering friends and family more reliable sources of information than the council themselves, which is a little bit concerning. We also, as Jemima mentioned, wanted to focus on the bilingualism element. And there was some research done about a year ago in the Eisteddfod, looking at Welsh language and people's experience of using Welsh language content on sites. And these are a couple of quotes that came from that. So people often just resort to the English because they know that the Welsh has been translated from English anyway. It's kind of apparent and clear that it's just been kind of translated in retrospect and it's not up to the same standard as the English. And if people are in a rush and they need to understand something quickly and with confidence, they'll read the English even if their first language is Welsh. So that was some of the kind of initial desk research that kind of pushed us to move towards the content direction.
So what we really wanted to do is understand how we could collaborate with local authorities and other organisations to reduce the duplication of content, share our knowledge and develop bilingual content that's accessible, clear, consistent, and is actually able to help people meet their needs around the cost of living. So overcome some of those issues that Tom was talking about. So we looked to choose one specific content area as a pilot and use that to try out some different ways of co-designing bilingual content for cost of living. So the aim here was really to bring subject matter experts and content creators together to understand how we can better collaborate to co-design content that meets user needs and improves service delivery, to really pilot a new way of developing bilingual content and demonstrate the value of doing it in that way, and embedding bilingualism in the process so that Welsh is not an afterthought. And then hopefully at the end of that as well, develop an actual piece of content that we could use across multiple platforms so that local authorities could use it. And so we were meeting those wider aims. So the content that we chose was around the School Essentials Grant. So that was previously called the Pupils Development Grant. So it is known by a variety of names, but it's a grant that enables eligible families to get help with the costs of school essentials. So things like laptops, school uniform, equipment, that kind of thing. So applicants go to their local authority to apply, but eligibility criteria is pretty consistent across the board. So we felt like it would be a good area to use as a pilot. So every area had similar requirements, but there was 22 different pieces of content and translation, which is duplication of work, duplication of resource at cost. And through our research, we found that this was an area that not enough families were applying for. So it seemed like a good area for us to pick as a pilot.
Yeah, so now we've learned a little bit about the context of the project. We're going to look at how we did it and how we approached it, and we'll go into a bit more detail on these things as we go through. But just to kind of start off with, this is the sort of roadmap that we created for working through the project. So just to give you a quick overview of it, again, we'll go into more detail on all this stuff in a sec. So we started off, I mean, first thing to say is like we broke this into phases rather than weeks, because we didn't really know how long this stuff would be lasting and how long we would need to do these, and we didn't know how many like feedback loops we would need and all that kind of stuff. So we went for an approach of breaking it into phases rather than weeks. So you can see the first thing was all around desk-based research to like understand what's out there already, what the different content was doing. Phase 2 was a workshop where we brought together several local authorities and did a review with them, like a critique of a couple of pieces of existing content. Then we moved into trio writing. If you're not sure if you're not familiar with what trio writing is, again, Adrian's going to talk about that in a bit. But essentially, it's where we collaborated to bilingually create the new piece of content. Then we moved forward into another workshop, which was to review with local authorities to review the new piece of content. And then we moved into like a cycle of building a prototype and going and testing that with end users. before producing, like, which is the bit we're on now, is like producing a set of resources, deliverables at the end of the project. And like, it's really important for us to, the point of this project was to like see how we can collaborate together to like, to create these things. And you can see here, like, we were trying to engage different types of stakeholders because there's lots of people involved in a piece of content like this. So we had local authorities on 2 of those workshops. We had like citizens testing the prototype. And, you know, aside from that, we also like engaged with Welsh Gov policymakers and comms teams just to ensure that like we were trying to get a 360 view of the project as it was going forward, and it wasn't just our team sort of progressing it, you know, on our own. So I'll hand you over to Adrian now.
Thank you, Liam. Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm the content designer in the team. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of activities that we've done. First, we did a content review workshop. Well, we did that after doing an audit of the existing content for the 22 local authorities. That was 22 pieces of content plus the translation in Welsh. We were looking for kind of metrics like scannability, plain language, readability, formatting. And then we brought together participants from local authorities and Welsh Government to do something similar, but with them, where we wanted to understand together what the issues were presented by the content, but also the grant, the wider context of the grant, and what were the user needs that we're trying to meet. Yeah. So can we move to the next slide, please? This is a screenshot of the second workshop that we did. Between the first and the second workshop, we did a trio writing I will talk about a bit later. But in the second workshop, what we were trying was we brought together the same people, and we're trying to look for the accuracy of the information in this piece of content, not that much about the style of the language as much as the accuracy, and sense check that we were meeting user needs, and also to identify if there was any information that was specific to the councils that we had to address as well. As you can see there, we were using a data whiteboard platform called Miro, where we would discuss the content while adding like comments on with sticky notes. Can you move to this next slide, please? This is at the end of the second workshop. We did a mini retro to like get a feeling of people's experience, and everyone seemed quite positive, and people were very engaged in the workshop as well. They seemed that it would be fairly easy to implement the content on the website. And now I'm going to talk to you about the trio writing that we did, so how we produce this piece of content. I don't know, before doing this, we had heard that National Resources well done it before, so we contacted them to get in, to meet them and see what their experience was and learn from them. So trio writing is a variation of pair writing that, if you're not familiar with, it's a technique we use in content design where a subject matter expert meets a content designer to write a piece of content at the same time. So the subject matter expert will bring the expertise and the knowledge, while the content designer brings the advocacy for the user needs and also the advocacy for clear, simple, and user-friendly language. In a trio writing, we're adding an extra writer, that in this case it was Kerry, so we could develop the piece of content bilingually at the same time, rather than translating it at the end of the process. In our case, rather than a subject matter expert, we decided to go with that Tom would join us as a user researcher. In this case, he would play the advocate for the user, and while Kerry and I would try and write and structure the piece and write the piece in a clear language that people could understand easier. I don't know if Kerry wants to jump in and talk about her experience in the trio writing.
Yeah, no problem. Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Yeah. So as you know, I worked as the Welsh translator on this, and it was the first time I'd worked on a trio writing project. And yeah, I've written a blog about it, so you can read the blog where I talk more about it. But I just wanted to say, really, in a nutshell, from a Welsh translator point of view, we usually gets obviously a piece of text emailed through and sits there doing the translation. It was really liberating and refreshing, really, to work on this project, and I think it made a big difference to the output of the content at the end. You know, the Welsh wasn't an afterthought; it was embedded in from the start, and it was it worked really well, because Adrian would say he'd say it's more than once to me during the session, you know, if we need to change the English, if you're doing it differently in Welsh, if the sentence needs to flow differently in the English so that it works better in the Welsh, please let me know. And we would do that on a couple of occasions. And another thing I think worked really well as well, was that Tom as well was a Welsh speaker, so he came in as well on a couple of occasions and was like a second pair of eyes on both the content, even though he was, you know, doing his role on the team. I think the suggestions he would make as well, it was really good for him to have a second pair of eyes on it. So yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed the experience, and I think it's moving forward, I think it's definitely a brilliant way of working that I think other organisations should look at, because it just ensured that, you know, the Welsh language, it was totally bilingual and they were treated exactly the same. And because I was involved as well from the beginning and sitting in on all the sessions with the local authorities and with the team from the start, I think it helped as well with, you know, obviously my understanding of the subject matter, and I think that also was a massive benefit then to the content that was created at the end. So yeah, it was great to work on it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Kerry. I think that I'm handing over to Liam now.
Okay, diolch, Kerry. Yeah, so after we'd created the piece of content, we popped it into the prototype. So if you're not sure what a prototype is, it's like it's a lower fidelity version of the final product, basically. So it's like before you invest too heavily in sort of maybe coding up a final piece or something like that, you can create like a lower fidelity version of it. Sometimes it's high fidelity, but like before you sort of invest too much time in it, you know. So there's many different ways that you can prototype, many different pieces of software you can prototype in. In this particular instance, we used a piece of software called Figma. It's got like a free pricing level. It's a kind of what you see is what you get type approach. It's like a drag and drop thing to creating clickable interactive prototypes. Again, there's millions of ways you can do it. There's millions of platforms and pieces of software that you can use to do it. None of them are really better or worse than the other. They just all are slightly different. So this one, yeah, we used Figma. And it's, as I say, it's a no-code platform. For this, it's a piece of content design, so we didn't really need to invest time in coding a version of this, because essentially there wasn't any clickable aspects to it anyway, really. Okay, anyway, so we created a desktop version and a mobile version. Stylistically, we were trying to create something that was sort of kind of somewhere between a gov-styled site and kind of unspecific council websites, rather than creating something that had, you know, colors and imagery on there, because that would really be distracting from the piece of content, and we didn't really need feedback on that stuff, because ultimately it's going to 22 different places. There was no point in styling it to look like any one or two of those, you know. So yeah, it was quite a generic kind of midpoint stylistically, and we went for mobile and desktop versions. Like stats suggest that most people would be viewing this content on their mobile, and actually some of the testing, I believe Tom said the same thing too, like that users would actually want to view this content on their mobiles. But we provided both versions, so then we could get like a wider range of testing. And yeah, so once we built them, we then moved into usability testing.
Yeah, cheers. So we wanted to make sure that this content was user-centered, and to do that, we wanted to review it with actual service users. So I used a user research technique called usability testing, where you take a product, a service, or a piece of content like we had, and you test it with real users to understand whether the content meets their needs and to try and uncover any opportunities to improve. So what we wanted to do originally was recruit 6 participants to test this. We wanted an even split of English and Welsh speakers. We wanted those from a geographical range of councils. Unfortunately, the recruitment was quite challenging. And we didn't manage to recruit as many participants as we wanted from as broad a range. So we were quite reliant on our council colleagues to help us recruit kind of the residents to take part in this. And as far as the Welsh-speaking participants, we ended up relying on one of our translators to help us do that. So in the end, we only ended up testing with 2 participants from Pembrokeshire who were English speaking and 2 participants from Gwynedd who were Welsh speaking. Regardless of that, we did manage to get a lot of useful insight out of the testing, and it was certainly enough to kind of validate the content we'd prepared and to give us some insight to help kind of try and iterate that further. So what we did then was
Sorry.
Thank you. I analysed all that kind of information. I pulled it into, this is called affinity mapping, where you start to cluster information based on themes. And there's a handful of themes that were coming out quite strongly. So the first thing was that all the participants found the content we developed useful and easy to understand. So that was really positive. They all found it an improvement on the council information that they were used to. A couple of them did express concerns that even though they found the content good, they were unsure if they'd be able to find it if it were in their council website, because there's still issues with kind of findability of content within their council website. So that's a consideration to take forward, depending on where we go with this project. Like Liam said, we uncovered a need for a mobile first approach. So all our participants said that they would access these kinds of services via their mobile phone. The Welsh language users felt that the Welsh content was really good. A couple of things that they expressed particularly were that the language was not regional. So in Wales, there's a couple of regional differences between Northern Welsh and Southern Welsh. Often when things are translated, it's more of a Southern, linguistically it's a bit more Southern, but they were saying it's quite neutral. So it didn't feel like it was one way or another, which they liked. There was an issue with Welsh speakers, even though their first language Welsh, they weren't familiar with the names of benefits in Welsh. So that was something we hadn't really considered before, but their exposure to things like benefits and kind of more technical names for services and things tends to be through English. So what they were suggesting is maybe we go against type on the Welsh language pages and we put English names next to the Welsh language benefits as well. And a couple of suggestions were made about including some additional information. So, for example, including timescales about how long the process of application might take, because people, particularly when they're in financial difficulty, they like to be able to plan and they like to budget. Things like whether they need to provide evidence about what they're spending the money on. The money's increased by £100 next year, why that is, that kind of thing. So that was all good food for thought. And I think Adrian is taking on the next slide.
Yeah, so hi again. In terms of deliverables, sorry, there's a few things that we work on and we are still working on. Obviously, we've delivered a co-designed piece of user-centered content which meets user needs and in both languages considered equally. We handed over the content, but also we did a version, an HTML version, so we could make it as straightforward as possible for people to implement on the website. We also developed something that we call a phrasebook, which is basically another document with like ad hoc sentences that you could use to tweak and tailor the piece of content to your specific council. And at the same time, this is sort of a living document. So with feedback, we want to carry on working on it. So sort of like crowdsourcing the information in this document. And then we are in development of a toolkit that will include not only that these documents, but also all the type of resources to be able to replicate and export and scale up this project. So it could be like from timelines to workshop templates, so the Figma prototype files, for example. We are building this on a Notion at the moment because at the same time in CDPS we're working on the new website. So we hope to be able to migrate it to the new website when it's live. I think that it might be live in June. But finally, like the most important thing, which is not an output and it might be more as an outcome, is a new way of working that we develop as a blueprint to be able to bring together different public service organizations to work together in the open and collaboratively on developing content in a user-centered way, so we can improve the content and the service delivery at the same time, and also embed bilingualism in the entire process rather than as some translation or an afterthought. That's it for me.
Jemima, if you're talking, I think you're on mute.
No, it's the team. It's not me. Liam, you're muted.
So sorry.
Sorry, we're having a few tech issues with this, so please forgive us. Yeah, I was just saying that we came against some challenges when we started this project. The first one being kind of establishing the project direction. We were quite a new team. Obviously, we were getting used to our new ways of working with each other, but also understanding exactly what the problem is and like an agreed direction then for the project. That took a little bit of time. Participant recruitment, like I said, was tricky, particularly for that kind of niche section of service users that we needed to engage with, and encouraging collaboration, which is part of the objective of this project, is obviously difficult for local authority staff because of limited capacity and limited time, and engaging with some of the work we were doing proved a bit challenging, I think, for some of our stakeholders. So in terms of learnings, I think going forward, we'll take a little bit more time at the start of the project to really understand the problem and set a direction. Citizen recruitment, obviously, I'd like to start that sooner, so we remove some of the challenge there. And we're looking at ways to give local authority an easier way to contribute and to collaborate. I've also included, so for success, I've included a couple of quotes from a couple of stakeholders about the positive impact that this project has had on the way they see working with content. Alex from Pembrokeshire, who's been really integral in helping us with some of the usability testing. So thanks to Alex. She had some kind words to say. I won't read through them all. As did Kerry, as you heard earlier. And I think, you know, just the fact that we've had a really successful kind of end to this project. You know, we've tested with users and they are really happy with the content we've designed. So that's really positive and really validating. And I think it kind of helps us understand the direction going forward.
So as we've said, we really want to encourage local authorities to use this content. So we've shared it out and we're hopeful that as many LAs as possible will use it. And we're also going to share all of those resources and be really kind of open about the tools that we used and create a real kind of repository of kind of tools and things. So that we can really replicate this. So we want to do this again with other areas around the cost of living. So if you've got any ideas for kind of the next piece of content that we could look at, that would be great. Let us know. It doesn't have to be specific to local authority. It could be any kind of part of the public sector that's relating to cost of living. And we're also looking to potentially scale this up more widely to look at an end-to-end service design around cost of living. So again, please just get in touch if you'd like to get involved with that. And we really want to communicate the value of working in this way. So the value of working in a bilingual way, looking at sort of the user experience side of it, and communicate how much of a positive impact that has on the way that people can access services around the cost of living, and get the support that they need, which is really the most important stuff. So yeah, if you've got any feedback around this, or you've got any ideas that you think we could look at the next area, then please do get in touch. We'll be doing further show and tells, so to keep you kind of up to date with what we're doing, and various blog posts and things like that. So just keep an eye out, really. Also, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's participated and helped us with this, because we, you know, the key element of this is collaboration, and we wouldn't have been able to do it on our own. So it's been really fantastic working with all of the various local authorities and Welsh Government and all the other organisations who've contributed. So thank you for that. I think we've got a few minutes for questions. If anyone's got anything that they wanted to ask, we're happy to kind of share.
Jemima, Gillian
Yeah.
asked in the chat who's been targeted in LAs with the web content. I think that you'd be able to answer that.
Yeah, so we've so far communicated out that content to the LAs who were involved in the sessions. But if you've got any contacts that you'd like us to send it to, then just contact us on these details, let us know, and we'll share the content out with you, because we want to get it as wide and far as possible. So if you haven't had it yet, let us know, and we'll share it with you. And yet we'll happily share the slides. We'll put the bit of it that we've recorded on YouTube. So sorry that we missed the beginning of that. And yeah, we'll be letting you know as soon as that toolkit's ready. But in the meantime, if there's anything that you'd like, you know, you want access to the Miro templates or anything like that, then absolutely let us know. But we'll contact you all and let you know as soon as that toolkit is ready to use.
Yeah, we're sort of just in development of it all at the
Yeah.
at the moment. So yeah, it's nice to stick out a nice Christmas present for you all. No, it'll be ready before then. I'm joking. Myra, have you got your digital hand up?
Yeah, so really great presentation and brilliant project, and please find another area of content to work on, like another grant. I would really bless that. I would love it if you could. And Kerry, please carry on working hand in glove with us as well. It's really great. So my shout out is really to the local authorities. There's two things I just want to say. One is that there is a network of chief digital officers in the local authorities, which Lindsay Phillips convenes, and I think it would be really good to present to that group. And I think it would be really helpful as well in that forum if some of the local authorities could talk about their experience or recommend this. And I really want to thank the local authorities who've taken part. I think you had a nice slide, maybe the penultimate one that listed them. And I'm really interested in following up on the implementation. You know, it's hard to bring together a group that you don't have authority over, you know, and you don't directly manage, and then ask them to implement something. So I think it's really important that we find out whether things get implemented and hear back from those pioneering local authorities that worked with us on how they get it implemented, and then try to get a presentation to the local authority CDO network, and also at that have some of the participants talk. And also, please, can we find another grant that we can champion and simplify and enable people to access? I would love that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so like the idea of this project was to, you know, try and develop a process for how to collaborate on these types of projects. So like now we've kind of created the resources, we created the workshops, we created a kind of, for lack of a better term, like step by step. It's never exactly step by step, is it? And things will change in all of them, but like hopefully we've created a bunch of that stuff already. So like the next time we can apply this to whatever the next thing is, we should be able to go through it in a shorter process. And obviously things will change and we'll have to add extra steps and take steps out. But like a bunch of that stuff's done. So that's the idea, isn't it? We tried to create like the way we keep saying, it's like a cookie cutter.
Yeah, we definitely wanted it to be scalable, didn't we? And we didn't see this as an end point. It was just, now we have a process and there are all these other services that could probably do with a bit of a tweak and a polish. So yeah, this is just the beginning, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Any other questions? No? Just say a massive thank you for coming along
Yeah,
and listening to us talk at you. And for those who participated, it's been a really great project to work on. And we're really excited about all the things we might be able to do moving forward with this. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Okay, diolch.
Diolch.
Bye.
Yeah.